Welcome to Aurora Connects Season 3. This is episode 10 for Thursday, June 10th, 2021, Where the Money Reside. I am Associate Artistic Director, Monique Williams, and as always, I am joined by our Artistic Director, Josh Costello. Hey, Josh.
Hey, Dawn. How you doing?
I'm good. I still feel like we do this show on Fridays, so it feels like a Friday, which is fine right now.
It's always a little
I'll feel different about it in the morning. Well, we are live right now. I know 2 weeks ago we had some technical difficulties, but we are live, which means you can comment along with us. YouTube, Facebook, we are here and can take questions in the chat if something comes up for you. But also we love to hear from you. So feel free to email us anytime at connects@auroratheater.org. That's connects@auroratheater.org.
Yeah, and this is going to be a good conversation. I hope we get some questions from you all during this great conversation. I want to also mention that subscriptions are now on sale for our 30th anniversary season. Starting in September, we've got 5 really incredible plays. I can't wait to share them with all of you. So please go to auroratheater.org and check out what we have on offer and hopefully sign up for a subscription. And while you're there, you can also click the donate button at the top right and help us out getting through this really difficult time and get us through this reopening and get us back to making live theater for you once again. And right now, for our spring campaign, our very generous board has a $100,000 match offer. So if we can raise $100,000 from you all, the board will match that. So every gift you give up to that $100,000 will be doubled. So please, now's a great time to make a donation to Aurora Theater Company. That's auroratheater.org.
Great. And our title today comes from a viral sensation, Darrell Riley B. Smiley. And so in lieu of a quote today, I want to play the video so that people know where we took our inspiration from.
Keep going. What a money reside, what a money reside, what a money reside, what a money reside. Okay, let me tell y'all something. I'm doing something real big this month. Any deal that y'all got and they beating us, I'm gonna be about $400. Just give me your pen and the paper, cause I'm asked what the what? What a money reside, what a money reside, what a money reside, what a money reside. Okay, I told y'all before, y'all know what I do. I give all these good deals and everything else. Y'all better ask about me because I do on that all the time. And that's on who? Man had a little lamb. Okay. Okay.
Oh, he's so great. Now, Darrell was actually a theater kid in high school. Oh, where'd you go, John?
I don't know. I'm right here.
Okay, well, I'll get you back while I tell the story of Darrell being a theater kid in high school, and how he does these little. He's a car salesman in in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and he does these little improvs all the time on his social media to drive sales so that he can bring people in and shop at his auto dealership. And this one he did late last year, and it went viral, and he is now a viral sensation.
Where the money reside.
And I figure it's apropos for us in this conversation to look at how art and commerce intersect and how we see that happening on social media and content creators and what that means for us in the theater. And I'm going to go ahead and bring the guests on because that will get your camera back. There we go. Yeah. So Josh, tell us who's joining us today.
Well, welcome to the show, you two. We have Jennifer Bielstein, who is the executive director of the American Conservatory Theater since 2018. Jennifer, you are the immediate past president of the League of Resident Theaters. Previously, you were the managing director of the Guthrie, of Actors Theater of Louisville, executive director of the Writers Theater in Chicago. So lots of experience running the money side of some big theaters. Welcome to the show. And we also have Sarah Williams, who's the managing director of Cal Shakes since 2019. Previously, Sarah, you were the associate managing director at Berkeley Rep, at Yale Rep. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Josh and Dawn.
All right. Well, I'm really excited for this conversation. I feel like there's a lot of opacity that people feel about how theaters spend their money, and we want to sort of open up the hood and show how this process works and where the money goes at professional theaters. But first, can I just ask you to talk a little bit about what your job is? What is the role of the managing director or the executive director at a regional theater?
Sure. I'll jump in. So for most of the theaters that I've been a part of, there's a co-equal leadership model where there's an executive or managing director working in partnership with an artistic director. And the way I always think of it is most simply that my role oversees all of the business functions of the organization and works in collaboration with the artistic director and the board on strategy, and in collaboration with the artistic director on external relationships in the local community and in the national community, and that we come together on any kind of key critical decisions within the areas that we kind of oversee, even if they're not in that overlap place, but that you work tightly as a partnership leadership team to be on the same page to lead the organization. But specifically at A.C.T, I oversee with a big team, right? With a team of super strong department heads, senior team leaders of development and marketing and finance and HR and IT and the box office and facilities and general management. And I'm sure I'm leaving something out, but all of those kind of specific business functions.
Jennifer also is amazing at building partnerships externally. So not only is she doing all of those things, but she's also out in the streets, with, building those relationships with the community, which I think is just also another big part of the managing director, executive director role often that isn't necessarily one that you would automatically think of. So I would say Jennifer explained it beautifully, and I just do that at a smaller scale here at Cal Shakes because we're a bit of a smaller organization. But the partnership piece of the managing director, artistic director relationship, I've always found to be one of the most unique and kind of the element that I find the most exciting about being in this role, because I don't consider myself an artist, but I want to do everything I can to support artists and an artistic vision. And so I can do that in this role and do something that, the theater community has always been my people, right? That's how I found my voice. That's how I found a space where I could be myself. And, you have to have a very specific kind of heart to be an artist that I just don't have, and I respect so much. And this is a way to support the thing that I love so deeply. And I find to be like a very unique position in the theater field. So I feel it's pretty cool how it works out that way.
Yeah, I agree.
As a follow-up, I would love to just know how you ended up as, the like money person. I know some MDs were actors once upon a time, were stage managers, but maybe you have different backgrounds all together. So how did you get into this side of the theater?
I mean, I did a little bit of everything growing up, right? I think I started because I was in Alice in Wonderland, and I played the Queen of Hearts in 6th grade, and it was like the best thing I've ever done, because I got to be mean to people. Like, I remember being like, ooh, this is so cool. This is outside of my realm of normalcy. But I did a bunch of stuff, and I didn't know arts administration was a professional thing until my senior year of college, and I had an amazing mentor who said to me, there's a way for you to continue to be in this industry and to make a living without having to be a stage manager, which is what I thought I was going to have to do. And I really hated the schedule. So I was excited to find that out. But, I I think how I ended up here is because I have a set of skills that allows me to kind of deal with the many aspects of the organization that Jennifer mentioned, general management, HR, and finance, and fundraising. I like meeting people. I like building relationships and developing relationships. And so that's all can happen in the role of managing director. And I think also just the other piece is that as theaters have professionalized over the past 50 years, 60 years of the regional theater movement, there's been a need to have really specific skill sets in order to do the work that we do at the level that we do it. And so I spent a lot of time actually training specifically to get this job, which is not always the path, but that was my path.
Yeah. For me, I mean, my family, I had the good fortune to always go to theater and dance and performance growing up, and studied dance, just as a hobby as a kid. And we moved a lot growing up because of my father's job changes. And when we moved to Houston, Texas, my junior year, I took a drama class and found my people. That was just what I loved, where I was happy. And I stage managed and assistant directed and was thespian president,
Me too, Jennifer.
Oh my gosh.
That's true to high. Yeah.
I knew it was very similar to what Sarah said earlier. I love theater and I love the impact it has on people. And I really wanted to support it, but my interest and strengths were more behind the scenes and on the business side of it. And somehow I did learn about the career of arts administration early on. And so in undergrad, I studied business and theater, and I had my own mission statement that I wanted to be a managing director of a regional theater whose work I loved. And so that was my goal, very, very early on from undergrad. And yeah, moved to Chicago after I graduated college and started working there. Although first in a restaurant, but then in a theater.
Well, I should say also that at Aurora Theater Company, our managing director, Julie Saltzman-Kellner, just stepped down and is now working at Curiosity in the Peninsula, great organization there. And we have an interim managing director right now, and we are about to launch a national search for our next managing director. So the numbers, when we start getting into the numbers, I pulled the numbers that we're going to talk about myself, and that's not my area of expertise. So if Julie is watching, she may be cringing over my failure to get it exactly right. But we'll see how that goes. But I have so much respect for managing directors. I really like the two-headed monster sort of model for theaters, having one person who's responsible for the artistic side and one person who's responsible for the business side. And that partnership it's almost like a marriage. You have to get on the same page as far as what the plan is and what the vision is. I did an artistic directors intensive a while back with Molly Smith and a bunch of artistic directors, and it was at Arena Stage. And Molly said something about how the managing director is responsible for capacity and the artistic director is responsible for vision. And I thought that was an interesting way of looking at it.
I like that.
Yeah. We're going to talk about budgets and how theaters spend their money. And we started talking a little bit before we went live about a question that I found really interesting. And Sarah, you had a really interesting response to it, which is this idea that I've heard expressed quite a bit that a budget is a statement of values, right? If you look at where an organization spends its money, that is revealing of what is important to that organization, what that organization's values actually are. And I'm curious what you both think about that. Sarah, do you want to share what you were starting to say with us before?
Yeah, I'm making a note to myself because most of the times these days, everything in my mind just disappears. I do agree with that statement. And I just lately, particularly in this crisis moment that we found ourselves in with the pandemic, with the cries for racial equity, with the shift and the changes culturally and also in our industry, have found the tension of that statement to be something that I have a hard time holding sometimes, because it's a budget is if a budget, when your values align with your mission, then your budget is probably aligned with your values. But I think there's a little bit of, because, the mission of your organization, your budget is how you deploy your resources to fulfill the mission. And so when your values are all aligned, like, you should be working on the same path, right? And I think what we're starting to see as we're like looking at all the various tensions and areas in our field and in our industry right now is just like that tension of capitalism and running an organization and running and wanting to achieve an artistic vision that's shifting and changing, and not just about making money, but about so much more than that. And nonprofits in general probably kind of like experience this, right? Like the desire to really change the world without the resources to do it in the way that you want to. And so I've just been thinking a lot about that statement, because I do believe a budget can be a moral document or a manifestation of values. And like every line item isn't going to be, probably the most, like, there's going to be some things that are a little bit tricky and a little more gray. And so I guess I feel like that phrase doesn't always allow for the nuance of the world in which we live and the space we occupy as nonprofit theaters existing in the Bay Area, which is a very expensive place to be, amidst capitalism, amidst all of the isms that we're kind of dealing with and seeing in different ways now as an industry. So I just think there's like an ever-present tension there. And I think that's a good thing, right? Because it actually it asks us to face certain things that maybe we didn't even think about before, right? And so that's a good thing, but I also just like name that the tension is there. And in the managing director role, you're like constantly balancing and prioritizing like where your values land, and then how people then see or make a judgment, based on looking just at like a budget or some numbers or something like that, without kind of like parsing out the nuance of it. So I'll stop.
Yeah, right. I think, interacting with some people in the for-profit world, in the commercial world, like the goals are often really clear, like they're there to make money, right? And so that's their measure, that's their metric, that's their performance indicators are all wrapped around that. And for us, right, our mission is entirely different. And it's not like the budget is part of the groundwork or part of the support for what we do. But I think it is a confusing analysis to say that it is a statement of our values, because so we have to spend a fair amount on facilities. Are facilities a value of ours? Not necessarily, but having a place to do our work and deliver our work is important to us to be able to reach people. So it's complicated depending on your definition of it being a statement of values.
I think it's interesting to note too that you guys have been in your position since 2018 and 2019. I've been in my position since 2019. We have a new managing director coming in. A lot of us are inheriting a budget that existed previously, and in a lot of cases, the budget is something that has been sort of slowly, built upon and built upon and built upon based on how things have gone in previous years. And it's always it's a big ship to turn. When the values start changing, changing how the money gets spent means some big changes to the organization, and that can take time.
The cool thing about it is, it's asking us to both say where we want to spend our money and to make active choice about where we don't want to spend our money, right? It's like we have to press, because you can't have everything in a resource limited organization, to choose to do this thing means you might not be able to do this thing. And that's a really interesting and fascinating question that's coming up in all sorts of different ways at Cal Shakes. And and it's just forcing us to think about things in different ways. And that is an exciting opportunity.
Yeah, and Josh, sorry.
No, I should say, and really hard.
Yeah, I was responding to the really hard part of it, like with what you said, Josh, about inheriting a budget and how often organizations kind of build upon it incrementally year after year. We all need a moment to, or some kind of resource to be able to make a big adjustment, because it is really hard to make a significant change in an operating model. I mean, certainly COVID has given us as many opportunities, I suppose, as challenges in that way, but usually it is kind of built incrementally and is really difficult to change quickly. It's not difficult to change, but to do it quickly is.
Well, we would love to maybe dive into some general specifics. I mean, Josh and I, we do have a couple pie charts at the ready, but we don't expect you to have your charts and graphs, but it's coming up on that budgeting season. And just as a start, we'd love to just learn, like, in terms of income, like, what are your ratios of earned income versus contributed income?
So I looked back at our 2019 numbers, because that was the last kind of more typical year, right? I think 2020 budgets are like, I don't know, that was just a wash. 2021 is like our rebuilding moment, So 2019 is where I was looking for some of these numbers, and I came in at the end of the 2019 season at CalShake. So our fiscal year is calendar year, which is not typical for all theaters, but our fiscal year's January to December 31st. And so our ratios live in the kind of, I think, pretty common space for theaters. So 40 to 45% is earned, and 55 to 60 is contributed. And the thing about that too, though, that I think is an important piece of the nuance is, like, when your tickets don't sell well, that ratio can really shift and change. But we tend to live in that 40% earned, 60% contributed area.
And by earned, we're talking mainly about ticket sales, subscriptions, that kind of thing, maybe like a little bit from concessions or from rentals or things like that. But
merch. They have merch, Josh. And
well, I'm sure that's a big part of your budget.
Places.
Yeah, the merch is really what's floating us, Dawn. It's really keeping us steady now. Primarily ticket sales and subscriptions.
And then contributed is donations, grants, foundations, government support, corporate funding, corporate grants, all kinds of stuff like that. Yeah.
All of the above.
Mm-hmm.
I too looked through our numbers over the past few years. I went back to fiscal 19 because that was the kind of last, as Sarah said, normal year before COVID. And our numbers have been more 50 to 60% earned. So ticket sales, single ticket subscriptions, group sales, all of that, fees, concessions, merchandise, and also tuition and fees, since we do such a significant amount of training from our MFA program to the Young Conservatory, Studio A.C.T, and all of that. And then our contributed revenue has been more in the 40% ballpark, though very significant in proportion last year when we shut down during COVID because of the loss in earned income that happened so abruptly. And then we also have an endowment of funds that are invested in perpetuity and that we're able to draw from. And that in any given year has covered 6 to 7% of our expenses. So we're a little bit of the reverse 60-40 from CalShakes, but I think most theaters are somewhere in there on one side or the other of it. And that's typically what theaters strive for, at least in the past number of years.
And just to name that CalShakes is seasonal, right? So we produce just half of the year. So we only have that much time to earn ticket revenue, right? So that does also impact that ratio because we just don't have years or shows year round.
And someone is noting in the chat, of course, that you both have robust, at least perhaps before COVID, I don't know, robust education programs. And are those programs self-sustaining, or do they also contribute to your earned income? Or is that like is there like a firewall between those things and your gen ops?
Well, the programs, some of ours do generate earned income if they're a fee-based program for our education work. They don't net anything over their expenses that contributes to the rest of operations. They're definitely significantly subsidized, but when you said self-sustaining, a lot of them are, we're able to do them because of specific grants that make it possible, but they don't net the contribution to the bottom line for us.
No, same with us. That's why we love our donors so much, because they allow us to have these incredible education programs, right? And it means we don't necessarily have to run them as if they have to be self-sustaining in that way, which allows for so much greater opportunity for young people to be able to participate in the programs and for us to be in front of a wide perspective and range of students. Whereas like if this were only fee for service based, that would make our programs look a lot different.
Yeah. There are, of course, theaters that have that model. There are educational theaters that have that model where the fee-based programming is sustaining any opportunities for professional level production. So it's good to know the difference, to distinguish the difference.
I was also going to say, when Sarah said we love our donors, we love them too, because they make the main stage programming possible, and they allow us, they make it so that we can have accessibly priced tickets as well. Whereas if they weren't subsidizing what we did, we couldn't do that. Tickets would be quite expensive.
I'm currently reading Decolonizing Wealth by Edgar Villanueva. And we also have a comment in one of our chats about if you're noticing changes in philanthropy, in granting organizations, in funders. And 2020 is kind of a hard year to rebound from, but do you have any insight on foundation giving, that sort of thing? Is it trending different than before?
I would say certainly and it's not a monolith, right? So there's a lot of foundations out there. There's a lot of individual philanthropists. So I will generalize with the caveat that we all know that, everyone is their own special snowflake. But the foundation's philanthropic priorities are shifting, certainly. And I think that in the theater industry, there's certainly foundations are hearing the cries for racial equity that artists and arts workers and people in the industry are calling for, and trying to figure out where they fit and fall in that those demands and those calls and those cries. And so definitely there's a shift in how foundations are thinking about their philanthropy and where money is going, and a focus on equity and diversity and inclusion and anti-racism and belonging work and justice work. And that is being, I think, centered more than I've seen before. And I will just name, I've been in this job for less than 2 years in the managing director role. And while I feel like an old lady, like I certainly don't have the history of knowing like all the various trends of foundations and how their giving changes. But I think just knowing the history of philanthropy, like people's focus and priorities change, and foundations often lead the way in some respects. And sometimes they're very far behind. So I think we're like really early in the moment to know exactly how much shift there might be, but I am definitely seeing foundations prioritizing, centering, having conversations around equity and anti-racist work in a different way than 2 years ago.
I would agree. I think foundations are, and again, like you said, it's not every single foundation, but they're working to right those historical inequities and are very much focused on that generally. And this is different than what's going on with foundations, but I think for a while we've been seeing corporate support decline across the country. It's just for the arts, certainly it's many corporations have deprioritized it, and it's much lower here than I would have expected based upon the companies that are headquartered here and the wealth that is in this community. Corporate support is quite low, I think, for most theaters compared to what it is around the country. But as a trend, for a number of years, it's been declining everywhere, and that used to be a more significant part of our contributed revenue mix.
Josh, before we move on to expenses, do you want to talk about Aurora's earned versus contributed?
Yeah. So I pulled our numbers from the last season before COVID as well, and we are, as you can see, more like A.C.T, that we have more earned than contributed, but it's still within that 55, 45, 60, 40 sort of spread. So that's where I believe, if I did it right when I pulled the numbers, I believe that's roughly where we were at prior to COVID.
Love the pie chart.
Thanks. I'm proud of it. I made a pie chart.
Looks great.
Google Sheets for the win. Well, let's get into how we spend our money. So we get this money, it comes in, we sell tickets, we put on shows, we raise money, we have our development staff writing grants and soliciting donations, and then we put on plays and we hire a staff and we do all the work. And why don't we start with the pie chart I made for this, because then we can sort of see how it how you all compare to what we have for Aurora. And again, this is this is an estimate, right? This is and perhaps from a outdated document, but roughly it's probably in the ballpark. So we have the big orange section, 42% is administrative salaries, and for this that includes the artistic director and the associate artistic director. So all the full-time staff who are not hired just for a production is the biggest section for Aurora. And then the blue over there at the top right is production salaries at a little over 20%. And that's the directors, the actors, the designers, the technicians, the folks who build the sets, all that goes in there. And those salary numbers include benefits and so forth as well. And also some of them are not salaries, they're fees for contractors. So, but I tried to lump all those together. And then the next biggest piece of the pie at Aurora is rent. And I included some occupancy, sort of facilities related fees in there, but we do not own our building. And that's a pretty significant chunk of what we spend our money on is rent. And I will give a shout out to John Gordon and the Gordons, who were very generous with us through COVID. And gave us 3 months of completely free rent and have been very generous with us working out what we can do since then. But in a normal year, that is a very sizable amount to have to come up with. And then the red wedge there is production costs. We have marketing and publicity in there as well, and then other operating expenses. All sorts of things in there as well. But that's sort of the again, this is the part where Julie's probably watching and pulling her hair out going, no, Josh, that's wrong. But something in this neighborhood, I suspect is accurate, at least reasonably so, for how Aurora spends our money.
The rent part, I think, is like that. Those are those little hidden things that people who aren't looking at our budgets all the time think about. I was looking back at our numbers. And for those of you who've been up to the Bruns, what that facility is, and it's beautiful and it's amazing. And we have an amazing partnership with East Bay Mud. But, facilities costs for us, maintenance, venue, facility, all of that is about 15% of our budget, of our expenses. That's huge, right? That's just so that people can come up and have an incredible experience. And we don't talk about that enough. Like we actually have to truck our water in because we are in our magical forest. We have to have our water trucked in, and we have to dispose of our sewage, which is actually incredibly expensive. And, we had a tree fall down this year, unexpected. Like there's just things like that you don't really think about when you're thinking about buying a ticket to a show. Or like, oh, this is covering the cost of the show. And it's actually, yes, and, we want to make sure the grounds are beautiful for you and maintained and safe and all of these things. So I just think that's such a great point to bring up, Josh, of those things, those expenses you don't think about when you think about theater and what it takes to make theater, because that is a part of it.
We've had some deep conversations this year about the facility and about, is this worth it, right? And so much of Aurora's identity and brand, I guess, but really the type of work that we do is so based around this beautiful, intimate space that we have. And it's in a great location. I love directing in this space. Like I think our space is so much of what makes Aurora special. And yet that paying that much of a percentage of our budget in rent is really restrictive and prevents us from doing some of the things that we very much want to do. And especially when you're thinking about values, right? One of our values is our intimate space, but then how do you balance that with the other values that we have?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the facilities number, Sarah, ours is 15% as well of our budget. I mean, and it's a large amount.
What about the other stuff in there for you all?
I was trying to figure out how to slice it up, and especially because things have been so different this current year and looking at next year. So pre-COVID, we had a $27.5 million budget is what it costs to do all of the work that we do. And during this COVID year, we shrunk down to 14 million. And next year, we're looking at about 17.5 million to begin returning to programming. And kind of across all of those scenarios and in prior years, I would say it pretty consistently panned out that 61% of our expenses went directly to programming costs. Of our whole budget, always 50 closer to 55% go to people, artists, and staff. And within any of our productions, and those direct expenses for productions, 70% of those expenses go to artists. So I was trying to think of what are the interesting salient points. And then there was facilities and, marketing expenses only 4+% and such. So I don't know if those are interesting or helpful.
It is helpful. I'm such a people first person. So I appreciate, Jennifer, the nuance in breaking it down even further to say, well, within that production expenses bubble, 70% of that is people. Within the, salaries, X amount is people, as opposed to just, the fringe we have to cover or, workers' comp, or, I know it all goes back to the people, but the where the money reside in people's pockets. That's what I'm always interested in.
Here. We're a people-based art form, right? It's people who create our work and people who see our work. And that's always been one of the things when I'm talking to people who aren't theater practitioners, right? To try and help them understand how many hundreds of people it takes to put on a show and how handmade everything is. And it's not just a product that you can replicate and develop these efficiencies with, right? We have new shows all of the time, and it requires people to make them happen directly on the show and in support of the show.
Yeah, I was thinking about that similar as well when I was kind of looking at the numbers and seeing just how much, when you kind of break it down into within the box within the box, right? That such a high percentage of our production expenses, for instance, is people. It's costs for our technicians, for our designers, for our creative team, for our artists. And that feels so great, right? And as your budgets limit, or get limited, like in these COVID times, it's like, okay, what do we prioritize? Do we prioritize production values or do we prioritize people? And at Cal Shakes, we're similarly, like we are prioritizing people. So that might mean that audiences who come to see a show in the next few years, that the production values might not be what they once were, but we're putting we're allowing artists to work, and we're offering artists a space to work, right? And we're also supporting that artistic ecosystem that, makes healthy communities. And I think like that continued to ring true for me as I looked at the numbers and thinking about how as a people industry, right, it's always going to be expensive to be theater companies, because we're always going to need people, and there's not, like, as you said, Jennifer, a way to like find efficiencies for the things that we're trying to do necessarily. And that is both like the most special thing about our field and also the thing that like makes the business model and the economic model really hard. And something that we're kind of constantly like figuring out how to hold both of those things at the same time. Also, I did look at our numbers and I was like, wow, marketing's only 1% of our expenses. That was illuminating to me because I hadn't kind of parsed it out in that way. So thank you for asking these questions, Josh, because I was like, we could probably, stand to invest a bit more there. And what does that look like, right? As we also think about building trust and relationship with new communities and with new audiences, that's where some of the values-driven spend should live and should be. And like, let's put some more investment in that area so that we really can be a space for all people and welcoming, and a place where there's a sense of belonging. So that was illuminating for me.
What's something about your budget and the values that the budget does demonstrate that you are proud of, and what's something that you wish could be different?
I mean, I think to me it was a little bit reflected in what I chose to say in terms of where our dollars go. I mean, most of our resource goes directly to our programming, which is why we exist. And really, honestly, I look at it through the lens of there's not any money that's spent that isn't actually ultimately in support of those programs. There's a certain amount, like, you need a certain number in the finance department, depending on if everybody wants to get paid, to cut the checks, to, kind of keep track of it all, and similar with HR and other behind the scenes functions. But our numbers show that it's about our programming and it's about people, and that's where the priorities are. Even when we're in a kind of theater that's of a scale, right, based on the size of the Geary Theater, especially, and being a Lord A theater, where so sort of the expectations around the spectacle that we offer a theater in terms of production values are there, still the super majority of the resources are going to people.
Yeah, I think similar. And, I think the thing that I would right now, I'm really thinking a lot about the budget and how we build back, because our budget's 50% smaller in 2020. We were at, let's see, hold on, I wrote this down for you all. So in 2020, our budget was looking like 5.8 million. And then obviously all of that was decimated when COVID hit. But this year, 2021, we have $2.9 million budget. So we shrunk significantly, right? And yet our ambitions are greater than ever. And so as we build back, rebuild, whatever it is, whatever the word is that we want to use, I'm thinking a lot about how we do that in a way that feels sustainable and aligned with the conversations in the field and aligned with our values and all of these things. And this is where the question of, if we do this, then we can't do this comes in, because I would love to be able to be investing more in some of the equity work that feels so vital and necessary. And so how do we do that and do the productions at the level we want to do the productions, and the education programs at the level we want to do the education programs, and we don't necessarily have more money coming in. So that's an area where I would love to see our budget look different, and I just don't know yet what that will be.
And to build on what Sarah just said, I mean, I think we are investing in the equity work and the diversity and inclusion work, and have been. And, that's prioritized directly in ways that people might typically think of it in terms of trainings and learning and awareness building, but also in our programming and in our programming choices. And so in spending those resources, making sure that we're being representative in the stories that we're telling and who's telling them and all of that. The thing that I feel is missing, that I wish was different, however you originally framed the question, is I don't feel we rarely ever get enough time to think and to really, I guess just for everyone to really think and be able to make the best choices and decisions. And I just wish there was more resource for, whether this is artistically, administratively, any of it, to just really feel like we're not always on that treadmill, just barely kind of keeping it together, if that makes sense.
Josh, what about if I throw that same question to you, right? Like, what values are reflected in our budget that you feel really proud of? And conversely, what are the challenges, and what would you like to see change?
Yeah, well, I'd say one thing that that has always been a priority for Aurora, and this long predates me, this goes back 30 years, is that we pay all actors the same rate, and we pay all designers the same rate, we pay all directors the same rate, that whether they're union or not, the non-union actors are getting the same rate as the union actors, and the non-union designers are getting the same rate as the union designers, and same for directors. And that it creates an atmosphere and a culture that I just think is really valuable, in that everybody knows the deal, and everybody knows what they're getting, and everybody knows what everybody else is getting, and it's like there's no special treatment. And the people who who are not yet part of the union, or not interested in being part of the union, are still being valued, and that's that's a choice. That's a choice. The plenty of theaters pay the non-union artists less, and I wish we could pay more. Right, we pay the union minimum for each of those. Right, and some theaters are able to go above that, and I wish that we could. But the the number of actors in a show is so important in when we are building our season, because of the budget, that way that we have, when we build a season, we are looking at, well, how many actors are in this show, how many actors in that show. That show has 8 actors, okay, that means we got to have another show that only has 2 or 3. And so that's always a balancing act. But I am really proud that Aurora has that policy. I think the time thing is huge, Jennifer. I really agree with that. You'd think that in this year, when we had to stop making plays in our space, that we would have had time to sit back and really think, which we did to some degree, but there was also a lot of scrambling and a lot of putting out fires and figuring out just how we're going to manage and sort of crisis management thinking. That went on and on and on and continues. And so I don't think we took as much time as any of us would have liked. And that goes for I'm the artistic director, I'm thinking about the art. And for me, it comes to the rehearsal schedule. It's very tight. It's very tight trying to stage a show and get it into tech at the end of the 3rd week of rehearsal is too fast. It's too fast. And we do it, we make it work. But if there was one thing that I could change immediately, it would be having every show have start rehearsal a week earlier. And especially as we are making plans this year to have a 5-day work week instead of a 6-day work week for rehearsals. And end the practice of doing the 10 out of 12s for tech, which is when you have, Saturday and Sunday, you're called from, 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. to get the show, to, put in all the lights and sound and costumes and have the actors on the set. And you do it because, time is so short, and that's how the union rules work, that you can do it that way. But it is really hard on people. And so we are, adjusting that schedule and starting tech on Friday and not using the full 12 hours. And that means we're essentially losing a day of rehearsal because we have to start that a day earlier in order to make it all work. And so that's, that's not an ideal condition for making art. And it's not an ideal condition for being a human. And so that's what I would change.
I have a follow-up question from one of our viewers, and this is sort of a perfect segue. And as I am neither artistic director nor executive or managing director, it feels like the chicken or the egg question for me. How does the artistic director choose the plays related to the budget available? First of all, does the artistic director choose the plays related to the budget available, or do you set the budget based on the plays the artistic director has chosen?
Depends on your artistic director.
I mean, we definitely have, we generally have a plan for the number of equity contracts, the number of, and so the number of total actors that we have room for in a budget for a season. And so when my predecessor, Tom Ross, was picking seasons, when I'm picking seasons, we are very aware of the total number of actors in the plays. And so in that sense, yes. And we're also, looking at, this show's going to need wigs. That's going to add a big expense. This show's going to need a videographer, a video designer, other expenses that a show might need. And so we're definitely keeping all that in mind as we're picking plays at Aurora.
Yeah, and Pam McKinnon is our artistic director and is terrific. And we started at A.C.T. around the same time in 2018. And so she thinks of shows that she thinks will resonate in this community and are timely and that make sense in our theater spaces, that would work well in the Geary and in the Strand theaters. And we go through a series of modeling out what are those expenses for those productions, what do we estimate revenues would be both for subscriptions and single tickets, and then what's the amount left that needs to be subsidized, because roughly for each of our productions, they may cost anywhere from $1 to $2 million. And if it's a musical, much more. And we still need to subsidize about $800,000 to $1 million based on what ticket sales bring in. So I think also people look at different shows and think that they actually make money. And because we keep prices accessible and all, they don't. And so we go through a series of looking at, okay, what's the combination of shows that we think we can make work? What are fundraising strategies? There are certainly donors that give on an annual basis because they believe in what we do ongoingly. And then sometimes there's show specific fundraising that we may be doing for that year to support a show that we would like to make happen. But that's generally how we go through it. It starts with the ideas and what are the shows that we think make sense at this moment in time and that will resonate with the community.
Yeah, lots of iteration, lots of drafts of budgets. It'll start like the most beautiful dream, and sometimes, some of those dreams get a little squished or compacted or shifted in order to like move into a little bit more of a place of realism. And so I know conversations that Eric and I have had, and we haven't had a ton of them because just the timing of my starting at Cal Shakes, but all of that has to be present, right? It's both the vision part of it and what's resonating and what do we want to talk about and what conversations do we want to like spark, what's in the zeitgeist amongst artists, and even Cal Shakes, which is a classics theater, like I love that we still have that conversation, right? Because it's not just new work that gets to be relevant in the moment, classic theater, and the way Eric Ching is doing classic theater is that too. Sorry, my apartment kitchen floor is slanted and I have a rolly chair. So sometimes I just go like sliding down my kitchen, work from home life, but also, so there's that piece of it. And then, you build in all the realistic pieces that have to get built in, and you figure out how you make it work and what are all the combinations of fundraising and ticket sales. And, can you, from a creative perspective, can you not have wigs for this, and can we save a little bit there? And you go back and forth a million times, and then you land in a place where hopefully, the tickets sell and you raise the money and the budgets work and you have a beautiful artistic product.
Beautiful.
Easy breezy, right, y'all?
I love it so much. Thank you so much. I have so much more I'd love to talk with you each about. We didn't even really get into exactly how these decisions get made, which is another whole huge topic, but we're coming to the end of our time, I think. Is that right, Dawn?
Yeah, we are approaching the hour.
Josh, I think, and Dawn, just thank you for having us. I think it's going to be I know it will be so interesting the next 2 to 5 years as we're all coming back. And we're all rebuilding, and what we all look like on a little further down the path. It's all still so soon, early, we're so in the thick of things. I look forward to kind of continuing this type of conversation over the years as we see where we all fall a few years down the road from now, because it's not a snap back, it's a process.
Yeah, absolutely going to be a graduated process. Yeah.
Well, and please, this conversation can be ongoing. It's still going to be up on Facebook and up on YouTube, this video. And so please do feel free to comment or to email us with more questions that you have about this topic, and we'll try to get to them.
Absolutely. Well, Josh, we have our advocacy for the week.
We do, yes. So this week we are shouting out the Canal Alliance. Canal Alliance exists to break the generational cycle of poverty for Latino immigrants and their families by lifting barriers to their success. They are a nonprofit champion of immigrants who are challenged by a lack of resources and an unfamiliar environment. They believe everyone has the right to achieve their dreams. Every day, they educate, empower, support, and partner with motivated immigrants and their families to best meet all their unique needs, from putting food on the table, to becoming U.S. citizens, to learning English, to graduating from college. Because when we support immigrants, Marin becomes a place where everyone can live, work, and succeed. CanalAlliance.org. And I did a little bit of work with the Canal Alliance when I was at Marin Theater Company, and they do great work in the Canal District of San Rafael. They're a great organization, so we encourage you all to check them out.
Great, thank you. So Josh already shared that folks can continue to drop comments in the chat and email us at connects@auroratheater.org. As always, that email is right there on your screen, connects@auroratheater.org. We'd love to hear from folks. And also, Josh, I do believe subscriptions are on sale.
Subscriptions are on sale. We've got 5 great plays for you. Go to auroratheater.org, and while you're there, you can click on the donate button at the top right, or donate with your subscription. However you want to do it, we will accept it. I want to thank so much Jennifer Bielstein and Sarah Williams, our guests for today. This was a really great conversation, and I really appreciate their coming on.
Yep. And thank you for watching. Thanks to our friends who participated in the chat, especially Amanda Mason, who used to be the live producer of this show, who is always on standby for me as I figure out how all the buttons work. So I appreciate her being on standby once again today to help me through. So thank you all for viewing. In 2 weeks' time, on Thursday, June 24th at 5 p.m., we will have our next episode, which will be Pride 2021. We will talk about queer representation, LGBTQ plus representation in arts and media and theater over the years, and where we are, the current state of things. So we do hope that you will join us in 2 weeks for that episode.
And that'll be co-hosted by Dawn and Katherine Sanderlin, our development director. So I will be off for that episode, and I know you guys will have a great conversation.
We will have a great conversation. And I'm so thrilled that Katherine is going to join us for that episode as a host and not just a viewer. So thanks again to our guests, Jennifer and Sarah, and thank you for watching at home. Thank you for staying connected.